we'll be discussing writing in the age of AI. It's going to be focusing on the intersection of writing and AI. We do have panel experts who are tech writers, UX designers. They're going to talk about the challenges and opportunities of writing in the age of artificial intelligence. And to get it started, I'd like to begin with this question to you panelists. All right, it's actually the million-dollar question. How has the role of writers changed in the age of AI? And what skills do we need to develop to work effectively with machine learning and natural language processing technologies? Go.
Yeah. Should I start? All right. I think it's interesting the question is like the age of AI, which is kind of just like, I guess there's like the age of AI before like 3 months ago and now that's starting, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But, 2023, moving on.
Yeah, but it's, I mean, what's the new skill you need to develop is prompt engineering, I guess, in general, right? And what we see is that really these technologies now, like if you know what you're doing in any type of writing or designing, this is going to help you make you so much more effective and so much more productive. But if you don't know what you're doing, you're just going to be really bad much faster. Or like you can still, everybody can get something out and it's going to look okay, but it's kind of like, you know, if you get your driver's license and you would sit down in a Ferrari the next day and start driving it, you're going to crash it very quickly. So you kind of need to understand the language and how to design it and what makes it good. So then I think with that, the way we look at it is that now the human is the creator and it's supported by AI. And over time, AI will be more in the creator role, but then the human element is going to be more in the supporting and curating, and you know, algorithms need parents too, and you're kind of going to be nurturing it and supervising it, but that does require a lot of skill sets.
All right, this being a panel, I want to provide a counterpoint. So I know, Hans, you have great experience from your talk and what your company works on. But just earlier this week, one of my favorite websites, Nielsen Norman Group, the founder, Jacob Nielsen, posted his analysis and summary of a recent MIT study where they showed that people who'd never used ChatGPT before were not only creating business documents in their scenario faster, but they were creating them with higher quality as well. And so it does challenge this notion. I totally agree with you. There's a lot to learn here. And basically people who don't learn to use these tools, I think will be a little bit behind, right? So, and I agree that there's also this before and after that we're kind of into right now. Like there's no going back from ChatGPT being available. It's available. Something like this will always be available, and it'll only get better. So it's a question of how do you use it and how do you apply it effectively. So I totally agree with that. But it's very encouraging to see that in certain situations, right, as they set up in this study, that people can become very effective very quickly with these tools.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question, like as you're talking, I love it. Usually you're on panels where people agree, and it's very boring. You know?
Yeah, right. No, we need some back and forth. Yeah, and we need to let Jonathan and Naomi get a chance too, I think.
Yeah. Well, I'll say because it seems like, and maybe the other two can sort of add to that. It seems like there's maybe like a difference of like the creators that if you're just, you need to communicate and you need to write an internal report, you can do that much faster and much better. And even if you don't really know what you're doing, that brilliant. But if you create like customer facing stuff where it's, you've got 1 million customers, every word counts and it's very important, you'd still want someone that is like very skilled and trained. So you kind of like, it becomes much easier to go maybe from like a 2-3 to like a 6-7. And then like the 7 to 8, 9 kind of as a score, that's where you still need the skill set. And now I will stop talking.
Yeah, I think, from speaking from the perspective of someone who works on content in a product, and so I'm going to speak from that context. I think, when ChatGPT, was suddenly the newest thing on the block, right? And everybody was so excited, there was probably, I sensed anecdotally perhaps, this sense of like communal anxiety from people who do the kind of work that we do. And so people are asking the questions, is AI going to replace me? Is my job on the line? And it makes sense because this is happening. And in the backdrop of all this happening, we have the economic doldrums we're currently facing and experiencing, and layoffs left and right. And so it does intensify the anxiety. But I do think that one of the opportunities that await us and that's ahead of us for people who are really interested in this and are willing to lean in is kind of something, it aligns with this principle that we've adopted at Shopify, which is reduce toil. And so it kind of helps us for instance, think about the process, if you are a writer, of getting words on the page and staring at that blank page and dealing with, that tricky writer's block or the cognitive blocks that you might experience when you're tasked with doing a thing. And it's like, there are time constraints and there are all these different factors you have to consider. AI does help us maybe accelerate a little bit of that process. And so I guess my thing is, it's not really something to be afraid of, not to say that anyone on this call is afraid, I don't know. But if anyone is, I don't think it's something that we have to fear. I think it is something that we should use and learn how to, I would say, master. It's fluid. I'm learning about it in real time. It changes all the time. Our level of understanding grows more and more intricate and deeper. And there are new things I'm learning about it every single day. But I do think, when it comes to prompt engineering, or when it comes to, let's say you're working at a particular company and you need to be able to train the model to understand your company's tone of voice or brand guidelines, and you are the person who is the custodian of those guidelines and the custodian of that foundation, of those frameworks. There's an opportunity for you to really lean in and maybe take advantage of what the machine learning is offering. There are ethics to consider. There's inclusivity and accessibility to consider. There are a lot of things that we can still do, that we do on the daily, that we still need to be able to do, even though the machines are here. They've been here. It's not new. The robots have always been around. We're just now, it's just a lot more maybe pervasive or more ubiquitous for those of us who are used to working in a particular paradigm.
Yeah, I actually agree. I look upon the AI era, as it were, as a double-sided coin, because besides the fact, as my fellow panelists have mentioned, that we can use AI as a tool in our own toolboxes, and I think that's inevitable. It's kind of either use it, or if you don't use it, you're kind of gonna be surpassed by people who are using it. The other side of the coin is we need to write for projects that use AI, and there's a lot of thinking that goes into how we can, whether it's a chatbot or something that we're writing for, or if our users need to build AI models, how we help them along the way with that. So there's these two sides that we need to take into consideration. And I think in terms of the skills that we need to develop, echoing what Jonathan said, I think there's a lot of ethics and inclusivity that we need to adopt more as writers in order to be able to facilitate what's happening in our products today.
Building on that, the talk about ethics, let's talk about what are the ethical considerations. And as writers, what is our role in preventing biases in language models? And can you expand on that? Ethics of AI?
I'm gonna jump back
in.
Or Naomi, you can start. I'm happy.
I'll start it out. I'll start this time. I'll let you go next.
Yeah, good call.
There was actually an interesting experiment done in America, I think, where they surveyed people and asked, would you prefer to have a human judge decide your fate, or would you prefer to have an AI model decide whether you're going to, I think the charge was theft or something like that. And they surveyed a lot of people, and it came out that most people would prefer to have a human decide their fate, because they understood that there were sort of like human aspects of a judge that you could appeal to, that you could talk to about your certain case and so on. And I think what's interesting with that is that the model is always inevitably going to have some kind of bias, and people recognize that. People recognize that bias is a fact in our lives, in our world today, and there's a lot of work that needs to go into balancing those biases. But ultimately, the machine is only as smart as the data it was fed into. The A of AI is artificial intelligence, and we have to remember that it's artificial. So yeah, I think I've gone off track and kind of missed the exact point of the question, but I think that there's definitely a need for people to understand the limitations of this intelligence. Tom, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's great. Thanks. I think there's a lot of issues, and I know our other panelists have great things to say on this. So I'm just going to say one thing. I put a link in the chat in response to Shannon's question about, what are some good articles, to the Hacks Toolkit. And this is something based on research I've been using quite a lot in my work in AI. And so it's a set of principles, and I've got these cards printed out on my desk. And the first principle is make clear what the system can do. And it's interesting to me that these are they're explained as, UX principles, but this is content design, right? This is UX writing. How can you do this without content design? And as I went through and I talked to the makers of the deck, I applauded them for doing this work, and I think it really, really applies to Jonathan and Hans's point about, how there is a lot of work to do here. Like I said, you're right, you can get started easy creating business documents, but from our side, we need to do a lot of work to make it clear what the system can do and apply all these responsible AI principles.
Yeah. Hans, do you want to take it next, or do you want me?
Yeah, sure. Also, I mean, for us in conversational AI, I think it might even be a little different, because we're dealing with situations where it's a conversation, and we have so many. Like, there's this case that was in Germany once, where I think it was a chatbot for immigration services, and people reach out, but the people reaching out obviously don't speak perfect German, and then because it was trained on perfect German, like these people are just not understood by that system, and it kind of rejects their entire identity, and it was really an awful thing. And for me, that when I heard about that case, that was like my eye opener. It's like, oh yeah, making these systems more inclusive, and how do you source diverse data sets. And like the thing that I've been thinking about lately, and I'm preparing a presentation on it, is like, that people are biased, and we're using historic data to train these models so that it's fundamentally flawed, and then you can kind of balance that out and try to do the best you can with diversity on your team and things like that. But I'm also kind of thinking like, oh, if this AI influences us in such a profound way, we kind of know what kind of people we'd like to be. Like, why can't we instill those values into these AI systems in a very rigid way that we actually get these systems to train us to be better people? That's kind of like, that's the thought I've been going on. It's like, you could lock in values now, because it's kind of like humanity is on this trajectory to kind of go from uncivilized to eventually connected with everything, and we're one people. So we're on this cool journey. But yeah, if AI starts influences us negativity in a negative way, we kind of fall off a cliff. We kind of go back to the Middle Ages with all the biases and the hatred that could end up in these systems. But if we would proactively actually try to change that, instead of filtering out the biases, what could we do if we actually decide we want to be really good people and very nice and very compassionate. So that's kind of the thought that I've been playing with lately, which is of course not applicable in your jobs tomorrow, but it's kind of like a thought that I've been playing with. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I want to latch on to that idea, though. I think that's great because you asked, like, what could it do if we decided to be better people? And I'm like, well, what could it do if our businesses decided to prioritize diversity and inclusion? One of the things, this may not speak to the question exactly, like what you can do to influence ethics today, but one of the topics I'm passionate about is in creating inclusive content, you need diverse and inclusive content teams. Like you need people, a variety of people working on this stuff. And that's where things tend to fall out. Like there's a disparity there. There are gaps there because that's not what we see by and large in tech, right? Like when you think about machine learning, and this may be a very simplistic way to put this, but it spits out what you put in, right? Like that's how it works in the most base layperson's like way of explaining the concept. It spits out what you put in. And so the reason we get racist algorithms, the reason we have biased resume scanning software, the reason, people of color can be conflated with animals with facial recognition software isn't because the machine is sentient. Like the machine hasn't made the decision itself. There's a bias that has been entered in because the people working on it, the people are both poison and the antidote when it comes to this stuff. And so like, I think as we continue to implement and integrate AI into the way we do business, we have to be looking at the makeup of the people, of the teams that we have working on the machine. Like, what do those people look like? What do those people represent? What backgrounds do they come from? Like, those are the things that will influence the AI so that it actually does feel ethical, that it actually does feel inclusive. So it's not going to get there on its own. Like Hans is saying, like what if we decide, like the people are working, we decide to be better people, more inclusive people, more compassionate people, more empathetic people. But we need those people working on this stuff. It can't just be the CEOs, right? Like it can't just be the people who are going to profit from it. That's all good and dandy. That's great. They're excited about it. They're going to make money off of it. Woo! But what about the everyday people using our products who need to use this stuff to get things done in their day-to-day lives? Like those are the people that we're a lot of times focused on, right? As UX writers, as content designers, as fill in the blanks. Like those are the people we're focused on. And so like, what does it look like if the makeup of our teams and organizations begins to reflect the people we're actually serving? And so the AI too intuitively begins to reflect and converse with the people we're actually serving.
Power to the poets. That's kind of the mantra that we have now. In organizations, we come in and we go find these poets because they're everywhere, and then we scale them up and we bring them to these AI teams. That's what we try to do. And we've also had these. We used to have a course and we would teach people, these are all the different steps that you can be to be more ethical and be more compassionate. And then we decided, before we do that, let's all just take 10 deep breaths before we create anything and think about who this thing is going to talk to. And that was actually like, everybody just slow down, just do that, and then think about what you're doing. And then it was already so much better. I mean, that was pre-AI, that was just in writing dialogues, but I think the same principles still apply. Yeah, I love that. Like you said that.
Yeah, I think it's important to be transparent in what kind of people have worked on the model and what we can get out of it. I mean, I'm thinking of it from, we have some AI products at my company, and I think it's important to try and build trust with people, to get them to use the AI and to get the benefits of the AI with that kind of disclaimer of transparency of what's gone into creating the model that people are going to come to rely on.
So somebody told me the other day, I thought it was very interesting too. General ethics. Let's say you've got older adults and they have a robot in the house, like virtual assistant, and they talk to it. They're probably also not aware that, even if you tell them. But there is, there's an office and there are people that are reading all the conversations trying to make that product better, right? So then it's already, but making that very explicit is going to ruin the experience for her in a certain extent as well. But you can find out about it, but just people are going to forget about that. But they're reading behind the scenes to these conversations. That's already an ethical question there. But then it becomes more interesting, because then it's like, let's say this woman says, I'm depressed. Does that team that's reading the transcripts now have the responsibility to call in someone, whoever, like family members or a doctor in the area where this person is living, to check in on her? Like, what's their responsibility all of a sudden? And then I had a conversation with like an ethics person, and she said having the robot there in the first place, is that ethically responsible on the family member's part, or does it actually give them a reason to not visit anymore, right? So there's the ethics of the AI, but the itself of how they talk and how it's inclusive, and it's all these layers around it of everything that it touches. It's so complex. It's nobody knows. I guess that's the answer to it. That's the unsatisfying answer.
So here's another question that's making us think about the future and what we don't know. How do you think AI will change how we think about language and communication? So are there aspects of writing that will always require human intervention and creativity? Or is there, like, what's the fake news factor that we have going on?
All right, well, I'll speak up since I'm the last panel member who hasn't spoken in a row. But one thing I want to do is call out to the chat. I mean, I think Ramon is making some great points that UX writers and re-emphasizing things I think panel members have already said. Empathy is what UX writers bring, content designers bring a lot of times. And a universal design principle is design nothing for us without us, right? Kind of echoing Jonathan's point. And there was a really good link to a Wired article as well about bias in these large language models, which is totally real. The misinformation is real. We need, as part of the product design process, we need to help provide tools to avoid that. And I'll go back to that study I was talking about earlier about that Jacob Nielsen had posted about from MIT. And what was interesting and what they found was that as these new ChatGPT users were writing these business documents, they compared the control was writing one without ChatGPT to writing one with. And what changed was, a quarter of the time was brainstorming, they said, 50% of the time was writing drafts, and then next quarter of the time was editing in the initial process. And what they found was that changed when you were using ChatGPT as opposed to doing it manually. And a lot more time was spent editing in that case, right? But there was enough time saved in the 50% of time that was generating drafts that people doing this were actually able to spend more time editing and complete the task faster. And so, the speculation from the team was that perhaps it was that extra time spent editing that made the quality better. So they completed the task faster and with higher quality, but they had to spend quite a lot of time reviewing the text that the large language model had created and correcting things and putting it in their own words and changing it. But in the end, they got better results. So that's necessary, right? There's no just output this stuff onto the screen without anybody reading it and editing it and taking the time to put it. So that's one of the places where hopefully, maybe even, I think if we can do it faster and with better quality, hopefully we do feel empowered. We do feel happy about it. We do feel like we're putting our creative effort into it in that way. So that's one way to look at it anyway.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think it's going to change the way we work. I think Jonathan mentioned earlier, the ability to maybe take a little bit of a shortcut if you need to, write a certain phrase in 10 different ways and then pick the nicest one. the one that fits best. I think for now, at least, where AI is right now, there's always going to be that need for us to kind of do a dance using it and then adding our own creativity and uniqueness above it. But I think even going forwards, let's say that a certain percentage of companies decide, hey, we're going to fire all our writers and just use ChatGPT. I think very fast the need for good writing will become apparent, because people will understand that it all looks the same. And we want our company to stand out. We want to look different. So there's always going to be the need for that uniqueness and for that human creativity layer above what the AI is giving us.
I guess that's because it's trained on what people have created. So if people stop creating like that, it's all, everything's just going to be the same, right? But the other thing I would say is what I've noticed working with it, is that when I ask it, I use it a lot for brainstorming and some of the first drafts, but it always comes up with stuff that I hadn't thought of. And I'm like, oh, wait, that's really clever. But it also leaves out stuff that I would have come up with. And I think it's the challenge, or it's going to be very tempting for people to just follow it blindly, but you're going to leave a lot of ideas and value on the table. So it's I'm always surprised by what it comes up with. And then I'm always like, how could you forget about that little point there? So that's the dance that you have to dance every day now.
Yeah, there are certainly limitations and constraints that we're going to continue to run into, and it's not perfect and good. It's not meant to be. You don't want that. But I think, and again, speaking from the context of if you're working deeply in a product, there is a certain level of nuance and knowledge that you have that the machine can't fully replicate. I've been using it in my work, and there is definitely this process of teaching the machine more about this particular product area. And even though it is generating things that, like Hans mentioned, some really great ideas, I'm like, oh, just yesterday, a quick section title. I work on the shop app. And so I just need to come up with a really quick section title as part of an ideation session. That's all I needed. And it gave me something great. And it was alliterative too. And I love that. So ooh, this sounds great. This sounds good. But then where do I come in? Let me think about how this language is positioned in the context of this experience. Or let me think about our users who are used to us speaking in a very particular way. Does this match our tone of voice spectrum? No. Does the word premium, and one of the words was premium, does the word premium kind of convey this sense of maybe elitism in a way, or I have to pay into this thing, or this is costly? And is that the emotion? Is that the sentiment we're trying to convey in this particular flow? No. So it's great for the brainstorming. It's a really powerful starting point. It is not the destination. We are still responsible for the destination and really working through the nuances of how language is positioned in the product. That is a skill. That is something that you learn. That is something that you get better at, especially if you've been working on this particular product or in this particular space for any length of time. There are just things that, that the machine doesn't know yet. Now it may, because part of the job is training the model, right? It's learning. You're going to teach it. It's going to learn in time. But yeah, there's still, the human element is still, I think, really critical, because we are, again, designing for people. And so language affects people differently, and we still need to think through those things.
One of the areas I found it really useful for is doing a bit of user research. Plugging in, what is the most challenging thing for, as I've mentioned, I work in the sales space. So as I'm not a salesperson, I can drill down into a lot of sales articles. In a way, it's like a very advanced Google, in order to understand better who my users are and how they think and language that they use. And that's an incredible insight that I can get pretty quickly, which is great.
Oh, Lizzie, you're muted. It's the Zoom phrase.
We only have a couple of more minutes before the end of the conference. So if we have one great question, well, actually we have several great questions, but Susan, I'm picking on you, and that is, what's the best way to show leadership development in the use of AI? What should we come back with to our teams?
Yeah. Okay. I'll take a stab at this one. I think a lot of us probably were, enjoying hopefully some vacation time in December. I was, and this ChatGPT was exploding, and it came back in January, and I was hearing already from other content designers that product designers were using ChatGPT to create text in their designs, right? And there is, like we've been talking about, this feeling of what's going on, right? Like, can we do this? And I think the response I had as a content designer was to lean in and explore that. Like, what are the positives? What are the downsides of that? And to share the results of what I'm finding with others and help people understand where the problems are. And like all the other panelists have been saying, there's all kinds of deep work here, ethics work, prompt engineering work. And it's not just as and editing work. Like, it's not just as easy as like, tell me what the best place to replace the best string to replace invalid request is, right? Like, what's ChatGPT going to do with that? Yeah.
I think it's kind of like, if you want to build a website, it doesn't have to take more than 5 minutes, right? You get like a theme and you've got yourself a website. But if any company in the world, if you're serious about your company and your customers, like, you're not just going to roll with that template, and you're going to need people to carefully create it and design it and maintain it. And I think you're going to have a similar thing here, where there's just like also in leadership, like inflated expectations, but most people have also been around long enough to see all these things come and go. And it's like, yeah, if you're a startup shipping a product and you want to have a website tomorrow, have ChatGPT write the copy, it's going to be fine. But once it got serious, you just want to add extra effort to it and make it better and make it yours. And I don't think that's going to go away. So as soon as they start following those machine learning models blindly, they'll discover that for themselves. And plus, leadership always has, our brand is unique, even we're all the same, and we're all unique, so we just don't want to follow it blindly. But yeah, it's like educating it and showing what it is and what it's not and what it takes. Like, that's what leadership needs right now. Because a lot of people are going to be pitching them. Yeah, it's going to work. You can fire 100 people because it will just do the writing for you. Give it a couple months. Like, they'll try it once, and then they'll pick up the phone and call you again.
Really quick, I'll try and make it quick. That's a timely question, because in fact, Jess, the reason I was late is because we are Shop's content design team. We are trying to engage on what is called an AI mission. And so we are doing our best to steer and influence the way AI shows up for Shop. So we just pitched our UX director on this concept that content design should be spearheading how large language models are integrated into Shop. And this is why, and this is why, and this is why, and we got the thumbs up. And so I think one of the ways to show leadership, the importance of those nuances, is to try to influence, try to get in there, because companies are trying to figure this out. There are probably some kind of tiger teams or missions that are developing something like that. in your organization. And if you are privy to any of that information, or if you have someone who can advocate for you and kind of get you in the room, or whatever the case may be, obviously everyone's situation is contextual and different. I try to try and get in there if you can, and try to help shape the direction that your company is taking when it comes to AI. Easier said than done. Again, everyone's context is different. Shop is we are a small startup within the greater Shopify, so we are scrappy in a lot of ways. And so we can have these conversations and we can try and get in there. But I think that is one of the ways, if we can engage with and partner with leadership as we figure out, what does this mean for our company, instead of having any kind of visceral reaction to it, being oh, no, we don't want this. Don't, it's going to replace me. That's probably not going to win you any favors or win you any points with leaders. I think you have to be willing to say okay, this is here. We're going to use it. Let's see how content design can be part of shaping and steering it. Let's decide how it shows up. We should be part of this conversation. We should be training the models. We should be coming up with prompt engineering frameworks. That's on us. We're the language experts. Let us do it. And you may actually find that leadership's oh, thank God. Yes, you do it. Please figure it out. Make it great for us. And then you can influence what it looks like. You can make it better because you're in there.
Thanks, Jonathan. Any last thoughts, Naomi? You're going to be the last thought person for.
It's hard to follow Jonathan. I totally agree with him. Everything he said. I think stay curious, keep your ear to the ground. It's definitely going to keep evolving and changing. And I think as leaders, that's part of your job to follow the mainstream and see, as Jonathan said, how you can influence it in your own area.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, panelists. We appreciate your knowledge and your wisdom on AI, because it is looking really overwhelming, I think, for a lot of writers in tech.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you.